Are you a defense contractor that uses a IT managed service provider to achieve IT and CMMC and compliance efforts? Are you a IT MSP that serves into defense contractors? If that's you, this session is specifically made for you today. My name is Greg Tomchic, CEO here at Valor Cybersecurity, and this session is a very important one because we often see defense contractors point the finger toward their IT managed service provider for everything related to technology, including compliance, and it leaves both parties in a very bad position because the defense contractor is expecting the IT managed service provider to take care of everything, and the IT managed service provider is trying to prevent scope creep and expectations that they didn't understand were going to be put on their plate. So we're going to be diving in today some of the things that as an IT MSP you can do to set your clients up in a better position without them having to ask, which I think is that proactive service that we're all looking to provide. And then from a defense contractor standpoint, the questions to ask your IT managed service provider if you're currently using them or going to use them as a part of achieving compliance. That's what we're going to be diving in today. But if you haven't downloaded our CMMC readiness report yet, we just released or re-released the 2025 version based off of the updates that have come out from the CMMC accreditation body and all the lawmaking process that the government is currently going through when it comes to these critical requirements for national security. So looking forward to providing that to you free of charge so that you can have the best chance making decisions and avoiding potential pitfalls as you go through this process as an organization. So here at Valor, we're a readiness partner. So we help companies from 0 to 100 to get ready for CMMC, but we do not do the IT related work and the technology related tools. So it puts us in a unique position to structure shared responsibility models. And we typically see about 50% of CMMC requirements roughly are documentation and governance process, things of that nature, and we take care of all of that 50%. And then the other 50%, which is typically where companies go wrong, is the technology piece. Do we go to GCC high? Do we build our own enclave? Do we configure our environment internally, or do we put it in the cloud? There's a lot of technology decisions that come into play when it comes to where to put the information, how to process it, who touches it, the type of equipment to buy. And that's where we see companies frivolously spend money and then have to basically reinvest more money, make that area of compliance right in the long term. And that's typically what we do not want to see and why we're putting on this session specifically today. So I want to start with if you're a IT MSP to defense contractors, because we hear from a lot of IT companies that they know it's not their responsibility to do compliance, but what should we actually do it? I think first and foremost, we always encourage IT providers to figure out if their service model puts them in scope of storing CUI or needing admin access to something that has CUI within it. There's a difference between supporting a system and hosting and managing a system. And I think there's a really clear line between the two. Most IT MSPs are just really resources that are providing a service package to a company's IT. But most of the time that excludes them from being considered an external service provider that kind of touches, stores or transmits CUI, which is honestly a good place to be, because then as an IT service provider, we encourage them to get up to NIST 800-171 requirements, but it may not be a hard requirement when it comes to your clients being audited. For the other side of the coin, the folks that do have more of a kind of store and manage systems that have CUI on it and have admin access and things of that nature where they may see CUI, we encourage them to build out their own NIST 800-171 aligned kind of program from a documentation and a technology standpoint. Offer that to your clients and you can increase your costs a little bit, and clients will see the value in that because you've kind of built the program and allowed them to plug into it to adopt a lot of those controls that you have in place, which is going to benefit them. I encourage any IT company just to kind of look at under the roof at those two decision points so you know which side of the aisle you stand on, and then you can make an informed business decision on if we do currently see CUI, do we stay in the defense space or do we get out? I know a lot of people were in that space. We see a lot of people just standing on the middle of the fence and saying, we don't want to implement CMMC requirements in our IT service provider, but we're going to try to get our clients up to date knowing that we see in store CUI, and they're really leaving their clients in a position where when the audit comes, the rug is going to get pulled out because the auditor is going to ask, we see you have XYZ IT managed service provider. Do you have some type of way that they align with NIST 800-171 requirements? Can we see their system security plan? And it basically is going to leave everybody in a very bad position. And we try to make sure when we go in from a readiness standpoint that the defense contractor understands the implications of using a external outsourced IT provider. And then when we speak to IT providers in that equation, making sure they understand their responsibilities in that shared responsibility matrix. And I think a lot of times that is the biggest point of friction in environments. And that's why we decided to put on today's session, because it needs clarity around it before big decisions are made. We see a lot of companies, because of CMMC and Department of Defense cybersecurity requirements, they now need an IT managed service provider because they don't have the internal resources. And there's some great IT MSPs out there, both locally in the Hampton Roads area, but also nationally, that we've connected with that are doing things the right way, but we see a majority of companies not doing it the way. So I wanted to put on, first step is really understanding, are you considered an external service provider under CMMC requirements? So make that decision first and foremost. I think that's going to benefit both sides, both the defense contractor and the IT MSP, to kind of make sure up front you've made that decision on which side of the aisle you're going to be on. Put it in your contracts as a defense contractor or as an IT MSP. Make sure it's in your contract that that is going to be a requirement as a part of doing business. That's all kind of that third-party vendor risk management that NIST 800-171 revision 3 has really heavily emphasized, and that has put a lot of people that prepared maybe in 24 or 23 or even before that a little bit behind the curve, because they kind of have to readjust how they're managing vendors. And one of the most critical vendors here is your IT provider and your technology tool, resources, or experts that you use. So that's going to be critical. Are you in scope of that company's environment? You have to figure that out, because there is a big flow down requirement here. We know vendors like ERPs and HR information systems, those are obvious ones, but an IT provider tries to keep an arm's length from these requirements because they don't want to spend the extra money or increase their price to the customer as a result. But these requirements, as they continue to roll out, if you try to avoid it, it's going to end up blowing up in your face. One of those burning boxes, as I always say. And we don't want to see that happen to anybody serving the national security mission, because it's critical, especially in the time we're in today. So false claims implications. This is not to fearmonger, but we have seen a company that basically went through the whole certification process. Early on, they gave themselves a 110 SPURS score. And as a part of that 110 SPURS score, they had in their SSP, when it came time for the certification, to say our IT service provider has given us the information to say they are in alignment with NIST 800-171. Then when the certification happened, they found the IT provider was kind of like, oh, we never really crossed that bridge. We gave them a proposal and they said it was kind of too expensive to upgrade to, and it really was a terrible situation. There was some legal matters that took place. It got very close to one of those big headlines of false claim, because they had a 110. In reality, they were nowhere close to a 110. They were probably in the range of like 50 to 60, because the IT MSP was really their whole IT department. They didn't have any internal IT folks. It was just leadership, sales, operations, and then IT was outsourced. And your IT people are the ones that ultimately most of the time are going to touch and help structure and organize CUI at the end of the day. And then the operational folks, you got to keep that in mind, is make sure you're taking a calculated risk when it comes to using any partner, but especially an IT service provider. We see a lot of MSPs, IT companies, becoming a trusted CMMC aligned. So you kind of go through this process when you're making a decision on a vendor. Do they meet the requirements you have internally as a company? Obviously from a technology and expertise standpoint, but from a requirement standpoint. So if the IT MSP is already aligned with CMMC and they've had some way to verify that through SPURS scoring, or they have a point of contact, that's going to make your job a lot easier. Even if you spend a couple more $1,000, even a month or even a year, it may not be that expensive depending on which one you use. Even if you take that extra money and put it towards it, it's going to save you money in the mid and long term. And I think people oftentimes don't understand that. They see an extra $1,000 a month to go with a CMMC aligned IT managed service provider, and they go with the cheaper option, requires them to spend 10, 20, even sometimes 40, 50,000 more dollars for that year, which, that's a huge investment for some defense contractors. So I encourage you as an IT service provider to have your documentation, socialize that with your client. And as a defense contractor, make sure you're asking your IT managed service provider the right questions. Are you CMMC aligned? Do you plan to be CMMC aligned? Are you going to stay serving defense contractors due to the extent of these requirements and the costs? I think having some of those honest conversations is extremely important. Early on, we had IT companies come to us and say, we think we're going to get out of the defense business, but they didn't go and tell their clients that, obviously, because they wanted to continue to have that trust. But that ultimately left their clients behind the curve, because they now had all of this tribal knowledge that an IT MSP has built and continued to build, knowing that when these requirements went into place, or as they continue to roll out and go in place, that they were no longer going to be there to support them. So it's really pulling that rug out from under them. And we don't want to see that happen to any businesses. As a readiness partner, we are ultimately a partner to the managed service provider that is serving the client, because it's a big piece of these requirements. So we want to see each party, the defense contractor and the IT service provider, have success. One of the things we offered to IT MSPs as a part of our 6-month program to get companies ready is to do a scoping exercise for them to help them make that initial decision. And if you want to take us up on that, to kind of help you make that decision, are we in scope? Are we not in scope? And then kind of thinking about, if we aren't in scope, language, how can we kind of lay that out or put language to it in contracts? Or if we are in scope, how do we do it in bite-sized chunks that helps us ultimately not have to absorb all the costs up front? Maybe it's creating a new security package for your clients who are defense contractors and having that value proposition. So if you want to take us up on that, feel free to reach out at our website at valor-cybersecurity.com. One of the things we also do is manage documentation for the IT MSP, and then that rolls out ultimately to the defense contractor. That's something we've become a specialist in. We know the IT provider has its own expertise and specialties, and we have ours as well from the documentation standpoint. So if you're an IT MSP and you want to take that documentation piece off your plate, have somebody from an expertise standpoint kind of help you improve the way you're set up, make some small recommendations based off of what we're seeing in the ecosystem, and manage documentation on your behalf and for your defense contractor clients. That is why we exist as a company, and we'd love to support you in that endeavor. If you have not downloaded our CMMC readiness report, it does have some IT MSP specific strategies in here, but we think this conversation is extremely important, both for the defense contractor and for the IT MSP. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, my name is Tomchic. Stay safe, stay secure.